I won't forget. So there we go. So we can continue to talk and let people come in. And then if I have to edit anything, I'll do that. Uh, say I think it's Savion. I think did I say that correctly, Savion?
Yeah, you said my name correct.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. For a Psych Tech student there, I see you.
Yes, Sarah.
Carol Hanner, I see you. Christina, yes, I see you. We have a colleague on the phone. Not sure what your name is. I hope you can unmute yourself and tell us hi and tell us who you are. Good stuff. Lindsay, Lynn, absolutely. Well, Cindy's coming on. We'll give folks a couple more moments and we'll get started.
Cindy Gordonier, hi.
There's Cindy.
I saw you.
Celebrity, right, Karen?
Y'all, I love Cindy Gordonier so much. I just fangirl over her a little bit.
I'm just going to send your check later on, okay?
Extra zeros this month, please.
Of course. You sounded so enthusiastic. I have to.
I'm vice president of the fan club.
Robert Eggleston.
So Cindy, I think you got to send a couple more checks. That's what it sounds like. Awesome sauce. This is good stuff, y'all. I'm just so excited. I thank you all for responding to the call. Thank you so much. How are you doing, Amanda Davis? We see you.
And from Forsyth Tech too.
You're at Forsyth Tech as well?
Mm-hmm. Math faculty. Mm-hmm.
Oh, is she? Okay, awesome. That's good. That is awesome. Let me go to the second screen here. All right. We have Janet and Patricia. I see you. Karen Williams, Mary Clark. Awesome. Good stuff. And just to kind of give you all a sense, after we conclude at 7:30, if you all are still game for a conversation, we have what I call the after party. And so the after party is just another 30 minutes of conversation off screen. I'll stop the recording. Sherilyn, I wish we did have food. But you can take and go grab something from the fridge for the after party. If I can make it that long, I will have my little Slim Fast right there. Kate, so you juicing, but I got the Slim Fast, and so we'll see if I can make it to the after party.
Hey, William, this is Sue Henderson, and I just wanted to share that there's a culture and climate group at Wake Forest, and I sent this out to them, but they are very anxious to have the link for the recording.
Okay, excellent. I will. I tell you what, Susan, if you wouldn't mind sending me an email at william@wtlewis.com. Send me an email so that I can send you so when I send out the link, you'll have it and you can send it to them. Is that fine? Thank you.
And Sue, I can connect you too. If something happens, just let me know. I'll connect you.
And this will be posted on Facebook, not Facebook, YouTube. So I will get the recording, put it on YouTube, and then send you all a link afterwards. But this is going to be good. All right. Y'all ready? I am ready to go. Let's make this thing happen. Let's do it. So let me tell you something. Hold on. Hey, Tosh, if you can do me a favor, if you can mute, not even mute, but if you could put some headphones in your computer, that way I won't hear the feedback. I feel like I'm in a studio or something. I'm hearing feedback in my ears. So, thank you, Tosh. And if you need mine, you can come grab them. So let me tell you something. I am just so excited. So excited about this opportunity, this conversation. I've been looking forward to it. Didn't necessarily know that I would do this. It was never part of a master plan. But as I continue to engage in this work and engage my colleagues here on the call and others and folks all across the country, it just felt like it was something normal and natural to do, which is to have a kind of a review of the podcast conversations. I liken it to, and we're not going to have the drama, but I liken it to the Desperate Housewives. If y'all watch any of the Desperate Housewives, and after the season, they have they sit down and talk about a recap of the season, right? Well, we're not going to
Are
have
you
that.
talking about like the Real Housewives wives
I'm
of
sorry, the
Beverly
Real
Hills or
Housewives,
whatever?
yes, the Real Housewives of
Okay.
Potomac, the Real Housewives of
God.
New Jersey, of California, Beverly Hills, and I will tell you, we watch some of those, and so I sometimes Tasha and I will sit there and watch some of them and just laugh at those folks. But I had it in my mind. I said, you know what? Let's bring all of as many as I can, all of the folks who were on the podcast, and have kind of a review for season 1, because in February we're going into season 2, and so I have new folks for season 2, and so I said let us go ahead and do a season 1, if you will, recap. So I'm pretty excited about this. Let me give a shout out to our colleague Lydia Disman. She won't be joining us today. She her daughter was ill, and she was this morning. She sent me a message and told me that she's not going to be able to join us, and so she was one of the panelists as well. Let me also give a shout out to we had 9 interviews for a podcast, and 2 of those interviews were white men. Both of their names were started John. Both of their first names were John, which is very interesting. And I hadn't heard from either of them to the request. But I wanted to let you know that there were some men a part of this. Someone saw the flyer, and they were like, "Well, I'm curious to." They posted on somebody's Facebook page and said, "I'm curious to know why is it that they're all white women on the flyer?" And I would suspect that they also probably were thinking about where were the men. Well, let me answer that question, and I'm not sure if that person's on the call, but just for anybody else that may be thinking about that, why is it not any diversity? Because there is a lot of diversity within the context of the conversations, but when we're talking about kind of racial diversity, why is there not any diversity? Well, that's simple. I want to talk to white folks. I wanted to get an understanding of white folks and how they and you all and come to understand this whole notion of race and white privilege and privilege. So I want to have a direct conversation. And if everybody can mute their phones, that would be great. Your audio, that would be awesome. So, and I'm gonna tell you why I wanted to have that particular conversation with my white friends and my white colleagues. When everything was going down with George Floyd after the murder and the protest, I was getting floods of calls, which I really appreciate. I was getting calls from my white colleagues. William, are you okay? William, how are you? I was reading on LinkedIn and Facebook and all the social media these tips, how to be a white ally, the 7 hacks to be a white ally. What is white ally in the workplace? And I said to myself, now I don't know if you can really become a white ally by reading 7 tips that somebody has written. I think it takes more than that. I really do. And so I said to myself, well, let me investigate this. Part of my training is to ask questions and to do investigation in terms of some of the questions that I have. So let me investigate this. And so I said, let me reach out to some of the white folks who have been allies to me in my life, at that time in my life. And I'm gonna be honest with y'all. This is the first time in my life, and I'm nearly 50. The first time in my 50 years that I have had this many white folks in my circle. Now that's something to be said. That's nothing to brag about, but it speaks to sometimes how isolated we can be and segregated we can be within our circles, right? And when I say the first, and I'm not just talking about circles for networking. I'm talking about intimate conversations. I'm talking about, you know, now I feel I know you, and we can have some conversations across all types of spectrums, just beyond race, right? So I believe that in order to become an ally, you had to go through a process. There was some stuff that you had to go through and think about and experience. And so the podcast was that investigative tool to ask the 7 people, the 9 people that were on the podcast, and the 6 ladies, the 5 ladies that are joining us today, to ask them what was your experience? How did you get to where you are? And very specifically, I was curious about how they got to where they were in order for them to show up in my life in the way that they did. I remember at Forsyth Tech, Paula would send me emails. Dr. Lewis, thank you so much for sharing that tip, that tool. Dr. Lewis, thank you so much for what you're bringing to the college. She was showing me that she saw me. She was expressing her appreciation towards me. And I was blown away. I didn't get a lot of that, right? And so when I got it, I was like, oh, well, okay, she's showing up. When I first got to Forsyth Tech, Sherilyn was probably one of the first people that I talked to. And we were talking about faculty development and inclusive pedagogy, and she had some ideas, and I was like, hey, how can we make these ideas run? And we just established a great working relationship, and I just got to know her, and I was like, yeah, she's showing up. Fabi and I met when I was facilitating a conversation, a brave conversation for the Center for Private Business. Fabi was one of the persons on that call. And I don't know, I must have said something. Hey, I want to know a little bit more. Fabi said she had made a profound statement. And I was like, I want to know more. Come to find out, she emailed me. She said, Dr. Lewis, if you want to know more, well, let's talk. I was like, okay. So we started talking. And when we were talking, I was sharing with Fabi the notion that I wanted to write a book. And she was like, you can do it. You can write a book, and the rest is history. And so we're working together. And just on that point, for everybody on the call, I'm in the manuscript stage right now, and the title right now, it may change. Hopefully it won't. But the title is Sweet Potato or Pumpkin Pie: The Conversations I've Had with My White Friends About Race. And so that is the title of the book. And if you have listened to any of the podcasts, even in season 2, you will know that my last question that I ask all my guests is, which do you prefer, sweet potato or pumpkin pie? So the Center for Private Business that Kate used to work at, where she used to be the director. When I first met Kate, when I first met her, she had on her desk. Kate, what was the name of the author? I don't forgot the author's name.
It was Debbie Irving.
Debbie Irving.
Waking Up
White. Kate had on her desk Waking Up White. I knew we about to have some fun. I was like, okay, she's woke. We about to have some fun right now. And so our conversation just blossomed. And from there, I was able to engage with her in the center and do a lot of great work. But she showed up in very profound ways. Karen, oh my goodness, Karen Barnes, that contagious energy, that if you know Karen, you know about that energy. It's just contagious. And Karen would when we first started Cam's Coffee, and then I was also doing some work. And usually when we would go and do Cam's Coffee, I would just kind of let Tasha take the show, and Karen and Tasha just hit it off. And Karen was like, Will, how can I help you? Tasha, how can I help you? And what I loved about Karen was it wasn't how can I help you and thank you. It was like, hold on, y'all. Let me call such and such right now. Let me text such and such right. Let me send them an email right now. And I was like, whoa, that's some allyship right there. That's like, okay, I don't even know y'all, but I love y'all, and I don't even know y'all, but I'm about to put support in your way right now. I was like, okay, we can do that. And so all of that, I don't think I missed anybody. I hope I didn't. I think I see everybody. So all of that speaks to, in my mind, allyship. In my mind, how people showed up. And so I wanted to have this conversation with us today in that regard. So we're going to get started. The first thing I want to do is ask you all to share with the audience, to share with our colleagues, which do you prefer? Sweet potato or pumpkin pie? Karen, which one do you prefer?
I prefer sweet potato pie. I grew up on pumpkin pie. And for me now, like pumpkin pie is what you eat when you can't get sweet potato pie.
Got you. Love it. Fabi, where are you?
I'm 100% sweet potato. And then when you add the word pie to it, it's probably neither one.
Got you. So from a dessert standpoint, what's your favorite dessert?
I rarely eat dessert, so I'll eat a sweet potato for dessert.
Okay, got you. Absolutely.
So we'll check off sweet potato.
Yep, absolutely. For our audience, you could put in the chat function which one you prefer, sweet potato or pumpkin pie. And if you prefer neither, just put neither and put your favorite dessert. Sherilyn, how about you? Which one do you prefer?
I'm with Fabi. Is that right?
Fabi?
Yeah. Yes. Sweet potatoes don't belong in pie. Sorry, everyone. And so I would love just a sweet potato and butter. That's good. So pumpkin pie, and only at Thanksgiving and Christmas. I mean, that's really, give me popcorn and chips and dip any day. But if I had to choose, I'm going to go pumpkin.
Pumpkin, absolutely. Got you. Sweet potato don't belong in pie. I hear you.
Throwing down the hammer.
She did throw down the hammer on that.
Right out of the gate. You're just,
wow.
Yeah.
But I have to say that I don't think carrot belongs in cake.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
Good
just saying
though.
you put vegetables in a cake. I don't know. You're messing with
Do
the
you
good
eat
thing.
zucchini bread?
I mean, well, we grew zucchini last year in our quarantine garden. So I felt like the Bubba Gump of zucchini. We had fried zucchini, zucchini soup, zucchini bread, zucchini noodles. So we did do that.
Now-
But I will say, Will, like Karen, I grew up on pumpkin probably. I really do love sweet potato pie, but my husband doesn't really like sweet potatoes.
No.
So we don't eat it very often.
And Kate, you did kind of do something to the sweet potatoes one time, right?
Oh God. Oh well, in all fairness, I tried this New York Times recipe because I actually really do love sweet potato casserole, where you put the marshmallows on top. I think my mom is on this call. She's horrified right now. By the way, she did not make that. It was the other side of my family. Anyway, all to say, I like it with marshmallows on it. And the New York Times did this really fancy casserole thing. And so you twice baked them, and then you put big marshmallows, and then you broiled them for a minute. And I caught them on fire in the broiler, because I used a thin oven. So that was Thanksgiving one year. I caught a bunch of sweet potato marshmallows on fire. So. Pumpkin pie is safer in that regard.
Absolutely. And when you listen to the podcast, when you listen to Kate in the podcast, she tells that story. And so I wasn't putting her out there because it's already out there. But I wanted her to share that with you. Paula, which one is it for you?
Well, I gotta say, I'm like some of other folks. I would, pie is just not my very, very favorite dessert. I would love cake with lots and lots of icing, almost any cake with lots and
Yeah.
lots of frosting on it. But for the purposes of this, I think I grew up on pumpkin pie, right? I think I'm reflecting the color of my skin and my northern upbringing, perhaps.
Mhm.
But as an adult, you know, at Christmas we had pumpkin pie and sweet potato pie, and sweet potato pie is the family favorite in my house.
Wow.
We ran through that first, and then the pumpkin pie.
Yeah. Got it. I see a lot of folks putting stuff in the chat. Check the chat out. We got sweet potato pie. You got folks said cake and cheesecake. Neither blueberry cobbler. I love blueberry cobbler, by the way. So that is awesome. Sweet potato banana pudding. That's another one of my faves right there. So that is good deal. So y'all keep it going. I know Robert likes ice cream. Anything ice cream. I think is it vanilla bean, Robert? Yeah, vanilla bean. And so I know he likes ice cream. Well, y'all, I was a couple of things I want to stay on this just for 1 second. So I asked that question because there was an assumption that I made. And I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I made the assumption because every Thanksgiving and every Christmas, when I would go visit friends and family, and my friends and family were African American, when I would go visit friends and family, there was sweet potato pie, not pumpkin pie. The only times that I saw pumpkin pie is when I went to the store. You would see pumpkin pie in the store, or if I was at school, and most of my teachers were white, and so for holiday celebrations, it would be pumpkin pie. Or if I went to a restaurant, not a Black or a soul food restaurant or a Southern cooking restaurant, but just a regular Applebee's, it would be pumpkin pie. So I thought that only white folks ate pumpkin pie. So I wanted to ask the question. So I said, let me ask my friends this question. That's safe enough for me to ask the question. So I asked them the question, and interested enough, what I realized by asking the question, more white folks eat sweet potato pie than what I thought. And I was like, okay. So the conversation really turned in for me. It was like, okay, Will, that's a myth buster. And so oftentimes when we come into the conversation with assumptions. And my assumption was that white folks only ate sweet pumpkin pie. And that assumption, you all have busted that assumption out of the water. And I'm like, okay, good to go. But you know what? Over this past, since we were quarantined and sheltering in over this past Thanksgiving, I couldn't move like I usually move to see friends and family. But we were with some family. And I did a poll, and it was African Americans. Of course, sweet potato pie. That's all we had around the table, sweet potato pie. And then I came across this article in the Kansas City Journal. It was a survey back in 2018. And y'all know what? It actually there is some research that says, yes, sweet potato and pumpkin pie, there is a rivalry between those two pies. And when you think about the research, like one of the ladies who voted in this survey, Black lady in Kansas City, said she never heard of pumpkin pie until 3rd grade. Another lady who voted, a white student at the University of Missouri, she said that she never even seen a sweet potato, nonetheless a sweet potato pie, if you will. You had another Black lady that said, put it this way, when she went to her white friend's house, it was pumpkin pie. And then when she went to her Black friend's house, it was sweet potato pie. And so I was like, okay, this really is a real conversation, Will. So it's nothing you just made up. Some other people have been thinking about this as well. What I found out is that here in the South, sweet potato pie and sweet potatoes in general, is more Black folks like sweet potatoes and sweet potato pie. More white folks like pumpkin and pumpkin pie if they eat pie. And it's also a regional thing. And so you find more sweet potatoes in the South And so you're looking at the deep South, Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, you find a lot of sweet potatoes, which makes sense. So as for me as a Midwesterner, I was like, okay, now it's making a lot of sense why folks are have an affinity to sweet potato pie down here. Something else which is interesting, Tasha and I, we talked about this as well, and she said she really she grew up on sweet potato pie. So sweet potato pie was like the dessert on Sundays, like every week that was like a dessert. Now for me, that wasn't my experience. It was Christmas and Thanksgiving and Christmas. So I was like, wow, okay. So not only is it regional, connected to race, and also perhaps your family culture, if you will. So she doesn't even like sweet potato pie because she's like, I grew up on it. You know, every Sunday that was the dessert. Whereas at home for me, every Sunday it was some type of chocolate cake, and that's probably why I like chocolate. So it was German chocolate, chocolate on chocolate, white on chocolate, chocolate on white, all kind of anything chocolate. I was eating it, and so that was a good deal. So, all right, enough of that. So here we go with our first question I have, or our second question. Share with us from your experience, from the podcast, from our conversations, what is white privilege? We've had a lot of conversations about white privilege. And in your thoughts, what is white privilege? I'll ask Kate to go first. Kate, what's white privilege to you?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting question. I've thought a lot about this since, you sent us some questions and we talked obviously in our podcast. Ours was a while ago, I think. And I think it's a hard thing to sometimes just define as a term. But what I think about when I think about white privilege is that there is an invisibleness to it if we have it. So, and I think that's something that white people, I'm just going to say white people because this is what we got going on here. But what white people struggle with is saying out loud that we have white privilege because we're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, surely other people, have an easier time of it than I do. Or, I've got hard stuff going on in my life too. And it's like, no, white privilege is real and you've got it if you're white. And I just think that's something we all need to get uncomfortable with, maybe wrestle with some, because there's just space that I get to occupy as a white person with comfort because I'm white. And also, I would add too, I'm straight, I'm married, I went to college. I have a lot of privilege in other ways too. I'm a fully able-bodied person. I don't have any learning difficulties. I got a lot of privilege. And so I think that when it comes to the concept of white privilege, white people they need to sit with that. They need to wrestle with it, I think. The people on this panel probably have, for the, some part, but I think it can easily be invisible to those who have it. And I just think that's maybe my point there.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kate, for sharing that. I see your hand, Susan. Go ahead.
Yeah. So just a little background about me for the group. My husband and I took in 2 African-American young men who lost their mother when they were in high school. And we raised them in our family. And so I thought I knew a lot about white privilege until they lived with us, to realize the things that I don't have to think about that they had to think about for access, for doing certain things, from going certain places, so
at certain times a day.
Certain times a day. And
Yeah.
and I've lived firsthand, a lot of injustices with them. And so for me, it's I like the word you used, Kate, about being invisible. I really, even before this whole topic of white privilege became a conversation in the last few years, 12 years ago, I started to feel I've got something that they don't have. I didn't know how to classify it as white privilege. I just knew that I didn't have to wrestle or struggle with thinking to do anything. And I had to almost think ahead for them all the time. And so that's what white privilege became very apparent for me personally.
Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you so much, Karen. I see, Lynn, yes.
I think what Kate said about it's being invisible, in many instances it is because it's systemic. It's in us. It's something that we have no real appreciation for just how much white privilege there is. I really don't like the person that comes up, especially a white guy. Well, I made it my own way. I did everything on my own. Poppycock. That isn't the way it worked. And I think the stats that we have come about since the assassination of George Floyd and the pandemic are so overwhelming. If you don't see white privilege come up from that, you're blind.
Got you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Baby, where are you on this? What is white privilege, or what are your thoughts about it?
Well, it's definitely for real, and it's not quite as invisible as what we all pretended it was for many years. I came into it as a first generation American and seeing it a little bit differently from a low economic standpoint. And William, your and my conversations have been enlightening and have given me the courage. And I shared on a later conversation that my journey was that I focused on my struggle and my economic and being non-American for the most of my life with parents with accents. And so I didn't realize that there was so much more struggle than just the struggle that I was going through. And then after our conversations, I went through that white guilt. I went through shame. I went through a lot and decided, after I wallered for about 2 days, I decided to detach myself from it and to see very vividly, even within all the struggle, where there was privilege. And it took hearing a very esteemed Black male friend of mine talking about his high level of education and where his struggles still are from just getting any level of respect and having to really be compared to a white man with no education and him having a master's and still feeling like he has to compete on that level. And so my education level is an associate's degree. I'm an entrepreneur, so the academic system wasn't where I shined. I shine in entrepreneurship, and then realized that that's where my white privilege lies after also talking to a great deal of friends that are Black, they're entrepreneurs that have come through. It's that I did get turned down for loans 6 times as a woman, as an entrepreneur. But what I did have was the privilege of never being asked what my educational credentials were. I walked into a room, and as long as I could speak what I'm talking about and represent the design and publishing industry credibly, then I was never questioned on that. And that, I believe, is 100% white privilege, because I do not see that with my fellow very educated Black counterparts. And that was a hard moment to really put that together. And William, I thank our conversations for giving me the courage to look through that And now I see it so clearly all around me. And that's the beginning of another phase of my journey.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Fabi. Before I go to our next guest, I want to kind of throw something out here for us. And y'all pay attention to the chat. The chat got some rich stuff going on, so y'all pay attention to the chat as well. Robert talks about this whole notion: is it white privilege or is it white advantage, right? And so look at those words and see. I don't care which one it is, to be honest with you. White privilege or white advantage, to me, is all kind of within the same space. But check out, there are nuances between words, and so check that out and interrogate that for yourself. But I would say that something that, and it came out on a lot of the conversations, but I think it was Fabi, I think it was one of our conversations, and you kind of hinted to it a little bit. This notion that you can have racial privilege and not be economically privileged. And Lydia and I had this conversation as well. And so I think when people hear the word white privilege, they would say to me, well, Will, how do I have white privilege? I got to work just like you do. I got to work hard. So where's my privilege? But I think it's the privilege is the other stuff that you just talked about in terms of that being invisible. So you can be poor and white and still have privilege and be white. So those two things are not synonymous. And I think sometimes people kind of get it twisted a little bit when they think, well, just because I'm white, I don't have any privilege because I'm poor. Well, you don't have economic privilege, but there's other privileges that you do have. Sherilyn, how about you? What are your thoughts on all this stuff?
Yeah, I'm thinking along the same lines of what others have shared. I can walk, drive, run, and while being white, and not be questioned about that. Well, a couple of incidences. I was walking in my neighborhood and walking my dog, and open carry my pistol. I mean, I live in the mountains, so that's what we do. And plus, my dog and I had been attacked by dogs in our neighborhood. So that's kind of, I added that to my wardrobe while walking. So I'm white while walking, while carrying in my neighborhood, and a policeman drove through the neighborhood, which was very unusual. And he stopped to ask me something. And just, something, I don't know what he was asking. But I was like, oh, I'm talking to a policeman and I have a pistol, and he asked me something. I answered his question. He drove on through. And then I was like, gosh, nothing about my, I was just really impressed with myself for carrying this, and he hasn't mentioned it at all. I mean, that's for the first thing, we're very under policed. And then, not even mentioning I'm carrying a gun. And another time, and along the same lines, I was stopped for running a stop sign, which apparently you have to stop at the stop sign, even if you're turning right. So whatever. But I also knew from
we did learn that in driver's ed.
Well, I was sick that day.
That's called a stoptional, by the way. Stoptional.
Optional. I like that.
So I stopped, and I have concealed carry, so I'm following all the rules. My hands right here, hands free to say. I mean, these are the things I learned in my class, not things that my parents told me about interacting with the police. This is what I was told from my concealed carry class. And so the policeman approaches the window, and I'm right here with my hands here, hands free to see him. And I said, as director from my class, I have a concealed carry license, as you already, he's already run my license, my tag. And I said, but I don't have a gun in the car today. And policeman almost laughs. And I'm like, what? Like, I I have pistol, like, you don't think, but that was like, and I thought in that moment, you know, wow, I'm sitting here, I've run a stop sign, did not get a ticket. I didn't get a ticket. And no, like, no questions asked. In fact, when I volunteered, which are the rules that you're supposed to do when you have license, you know, again, no questions asked. I'm like, I'm really, this is not the way everyone is treated. But, you know, just other things like code switching. You know, I don't have to put energy into thinking about the words that are coming out of my mouth and how I present myself here versus how I present myself here. You know, sometimes I get really excited, my mountain dialect comes out, but you know, it's cute. It's not threatening and offensive. So I don't have to put a lot of energy into how I present myself. I can go in COVID times, I can walk off the treadmill and into a meeting and just, you know, here I am, get over it. I mean, those are the kinds of things I still have to think about. And I didn't know I wasn't, kind of like what Kate was saying, I didn't know I wasn't thinking about them because this is how I live in my bubble.
Wow, Sherilyn, thank you. There's some rich stuff in the chat, y'all. There's some rich stuff there. Sherilyn, you know, first of all, I didn't learn something new about you today. I didn't know you have an open carry license. So good stuff. But you know what? I tell you that I think that for me, that's probably the biggest example of white privilege, what you said in terms of being able to carry a gun openly and nobody sweat you over it. I'm tripping. And that's some code switching, right? That's kind of some slang right there, y'all. So when I say I'm tripping, y'all stay with me. I'm gonna go back and forth a little bit. But I'm really, really tripping off of that because right couple of months ago, Tasha and I, we were at oh my goodness, we were at Lowe's, I think. We were looking for a new fridge or something. And there's this white guy checking out, and he got a gun on the side. And so I look at him and I look at her and I said, look at that. I said, now, if I had a gun, I wouldn't get out this store with somebody harassing me and asking me for my papers. And I don't carry, I don't have one, but the fact of the matter is just and so I was a little upset about that because I'm like, you know, this guy is walking around, you know, just free. And it's his and my constitutional right to carry a gun. But I, because of my skin color, will be questioned more times than not than he would be. And so I think when you think about white privilege, that's a real example. And from an African-American male, I want you to know that that's real. You spoke truth to power to that right there. Karen, how about you? I see you, Mary. I will get you after I ask Karen her thoughts.
I'm not usually intimidated, but these answers have been so good. And I don't want to give sort of a textbook definition. I just want to say that for me, it's an unraveling. Invisible was actually the word I've been thinking about all day, Kate. Thanks a lot. But as I sit here and try to think of another word, it is tearing apart structures that have been part of the fabric of my life and my community and my society. And my hope is that, you know, we can weave them back in a much more beautiful way. I think, Will, you and I talked about this in our podcast together. But I think one of the ways that I experience privilege, and I am gay, just for the record. So as if you couldn't tell by the way that I'm dressed, because Joe Biden is my new fashion guide here. So taking my fashion cues from Papa Joe. So listen.
But you got your maroon on like Michelle, girl.
Oh yeah. Michelle and I coordinated on that. We coordinated.
Saying.
I got my Kamala beads on.
Beautiful, beautiful.
see you, baby. I see you, Paula.
You know, sometimes you don't understand it until you experience it, right? And the first time I experienced not being able to do something that everyone else could do is when I could not legally marry the person that I had chosen to spend my life with, right? And I'm not equating, you know, the things that are have been denied, you know, to gay people and minorities, like, but it's the closest I can come, right? And sometimes it's that experience that really wakes you up, right? And for me, it's just been little things here and there, like had an intern that I just loved, young African-American guy. And he came in, he was so great, super fast learner. I just talked to him last week, in fact. And he came in one day and he said, Karen, I'm gonna have to quit working here. Why? You know, Mendez, you're doing so great. I thought you really liked it. He said, my grandfather doesn't like me having a white job, a white person job. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, help me understand that. And I said, what is a white person job and what's not a white person job? Like a black job, a black person job. He said, a black person job is, in my grandfather's mind, flipping hamburgers at Wendy's for $8 an hour. And I said, wow, you know, you're learning things here. You're learning skills that you can take on and learn from. And I'm paying you I'm paying you $10 an hour. You're 16 years old. Like, I know that's not a lot, but I'm a teeny tiny nonprofit. And he was like, because you work downtown and it's a white person job in my grandfather's mind, because most everybody else that is around here in the office building is white, and there's not a lot of diversity where the office is. And it's just been little moments like that with people that I care about, with people that have enlightened me and woken me up. And the experience that I've had of not being able to do something that everybody else is able to do.
Yeah. Karen, thank you. Something you said, which is really, really key. You said you're trying to get the closest thing that you can get to is being a part of the LGBT community and not being able to marry, right? And having that to be a challenge for you at one point in time. What that speaks to me is empathy. And I think that when we begin to have empathy and when we begin to try to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, when we try to connect an experience that we had that kind of gets close to somebody else's experience, because here's the reality: pain is pain. I don't care if it's from a black person or a white person. You know, happy is happy, joy is joy. And so the moment that I can empathize with you, then I'm getting closer to understanding, right? And I think that's where we need to be, is this place of empathy. Mary, I saw your hand, Mary. Is Mary still here? I'm looking across my screen. If you're still, Mary Clark.
I'm here.
Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
I'm always puzzled about how, and since this is an open forum, about how white people describe white privilege. And all of the examples that were given today are great examples of what you recognize. But the truth of the matter is, white privilege is a result of systemic racism. Every system in America is designed to approve, to accept, and to protect the white race and their privileges. You can't think of any system, whether it's religious, judicial, if it's the White House, school system, tax system, you name it. All of it was designed to protect it. And if we look at our history, we would know that's true, because white race is probably the only race that has not been renamed by the United States government since you had it. Most other races get renamed or switched around, or whatever suits the government in terms of profit. So I guess what I'm saying is there's no escaping white privilege as long as we have systemic racism. The best that I think we can hope for it's like conversations like this that we recognize it and kind of expose the recognition to others. But as long as our government pass rules and laws that protect that privilege, such as we've seen in the last election, trying to get rid of the Black vote and so forth and so on, it really is going to be here. No escaping it. Think about your churches or your religious place you go to. It is systemic. Having said that, I am really, this is my first time here, I'm really encouraged to hear real conversations about it.
Hey, Mary, thank you so much. Really appreciate you putting that down for us. The in 1676, Bacon's Rebellion happened. Now, and this is Bacon's Rebellion in Virginia. So what happened is that most of the plantation owners, contrary to Gone with the Wind and the other movies that we may have seen back in the day, most of the plantation owners, most of the folks back there were poor. And it was only like 25% of the folks owned slaves and were plantation owners. And so you had 1776, you had slavery that started in 1619. The first slaves came over to the United States, or the colonial America at the time, colonial times, 1676, you had Bacon was a poor white man who said, I would like some land. I want some of what y'all got over there. And so he got some of his folks, some of his other poor white men friends, and he also got was able to get some indentured servants, and also got some free Black slaves, or some free Blacks and some slaves. They got together and they rebelled against the governor of Virginia and the white plantation owners. To me, this was America's first labor protest. Now, if you read your history, it was not just labor, it was land, labor. Also, Bacon wanted to displace the indigenous people, the original people of the land. So they wanted to move the Native Americans away from their land so he can take that land. And so the rebellion happened, it was squashed. But as a result of the squash, Mary, I'm getting to your point. As a result of that rebellion being squashed, the white plantation owners said, hey, y'all white folks over there, y'all white poor folks, y'all come on over here with us. Y'all, let's get together. At this time, race was not conceived of, because you had the different, it was ethnicity that people, so you had the Dutch and you had the French and you had the Germans, but white was not conceived of quite yet. But when Bacon's Rebellion happened, they said, okay, well, y'all come over here. Let us form a sense of uniformity and solidarity around race. We're going to be white. And the slaves, the African slaves, they're going to be Black. And the reason why they said this is because they saw the uproar and the anger of the Black slaves. And they said, now, if these Black folks begin to really, really coalesce and they begin to engage with poor white folks, then we're going to lose our power. So let's maintain our power by making classification around race. So then that was 1676. Then in 1690, you begin to see or in the 1700s, you begin to see slave codes, 1705, Virginia slave codes. And the Virginia slave codes were a bunch of Mary, to your point, a bunch of laws, state laws, or colonial laws that said, hey, we're going to change how people interact. The slaves can't do this. They're going to get punished for that. White folks can do this. Servants can do that. Y'all read your history. So everything was codified by the law. Then you begin to see, after that, you begin to see the Civil War. I'm sorry, not the Civil War. You begin to see the American Revolutionary War. You see the Constitution. Look at the Constitution and see how many compromises were made around race. The Constitution is not race neutral. It is very race conscious. And our laws are not, our justice system is not a blind justice system. Justice is not blind. Justice is not colorblind. Justice sees race and it sees poverty. And so, Mary, to your point, absolutely. These things, racism in America is embedded within our systems, and we cannot eradicate it unless we begin to interrogate and root it out of the systems that we live in. So absolutely.
Well, I would say like two things, and I think we talk about this in my episode, but if we don't, then here we go. White people on this call, if you haven't listened to the 1619 podcast, it has been out for a while, so you may have, and if you're the kind of person motivated to join for an evening like this, then you may have listened to it already. But I thought that was a really interesting podcast, and one of the episodes talks about the economic foundation of the South and how it was built on free labor, and how actually, to your point, Will, it really resembles the modern corporation in many ways, because there was a lot of middle management. Not everybody was a plantation owner. It was not Gone with the Wind. So I think you make a really good point. I think also, Mary, and I'm appreciative of you, Mary, for speaking up. I also want to say, like, when white people think this privilege is invisible, I mean, it's invisible sometimes to us. It's not invisible to other people. So let me just make that distinction. I mean, there are just times we don't see it because we don't have to see it. And Mary, that's why, is because it is baked in to every single thing we do. Like, it's just the air we breathe. And I think when I went to hear Debbie Irving, and Will, this is when you came into my life and helped me on sort of my journey, was right after I had heard Debbie Irving speak. If you've not read her book, it's really good. I recommend it. But I went to hear her speak, and I was like 30, I don't know, 2, 3, something. And I walked in like all the white people I knew at that point, that I was like, I voted for Barack Obama, and I'm like really cool, and I'm hip. Like, I'm not racist, and I walked in to hear Debbie Irving speak, and she started talking about zip codes and the GI Bill and all this stuff. And I just left that luncheon feeling like a shell of myself, because she really took me to task and challenged what I thought about race and my own privilege. And just, again, I go back to, like, if you've not read her book, Waking Up White, it will set you on it. For me, at least, it set me on my journey to becoming more racially aware. So,
Paul, I'm gonna come to you right 1 second. I want to take Jonathan's hand. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Well, thank you. I appreciate. I think it goes also to, as you were talking about Bacon's Rebellion and the continuation and the systemic idea we have of white privilege, white advantage. We've seen a insurrection happen, Wilmington, 1898. If you study that, you have basically red shirts, which was a version of the Klan, take over Wilmington, North Carolina, because back then the Republican government was very pro-black, and they overthrow it and nothing happens. The state government, the federal government doesn't do a thing. They don't react. And for 7 years, really 5 to 7 years, they're able to rule over
What just happened?
I think we lost him.
Oh my goodness. Hopefully he'll come back. He was he was on to something right there. And Robert, I'm gonna get to Paula, but I know Robert has some history on North Carolina as well. But Robert, before you speak, let me get to Paula. Paula, what are your thoughts on this in terms of kind of white privilege and all of that?
Yeah, well, I really want to thank Mary and everybody else who has already shared, because I think that there was so much good stuff there and very important comments. I really don't want to repeat, but I think that what I've recognized throughout all this is just how very much privilege that I have and how much white privilege, majority privilege in so many ways, right? I just show up in this world and walk through it sort of totally blind to how everything has been structured to set me up for success, right? So I had sort of an aha moment for me a few years ago, and I was working with a colleague and an African-American woman, and we were talking about how something was going and a meeting we'd just come from, and I've never been afraid to speak up. People who know me here, Dr. Lewis, you know, I'm pretty outspoken and I speak my mind. And until the conversation with her, I didn't understand why she wasn't speaking up, why she wasn't conveying her thoughts in a group setting that we were sharing, and why she wasn't speaking up with her ideas. And she said, "You don't realize, because of the color of my skin, because of the position I was in, so many things, I had all this privilege that I'm coming into these conversations with, that I don't have to worry about code switching or filtering what I'm saying. I just put it all out there, and society has said that that's acceptable. That is what we're going for. This is the approved approach, right?" And it just hit me that I have so much, that's not just a personality trait that, you know, Paula's so good with this, and it's because I've been given that, and that others have not. And I think that was just, I don't know, just an aha moment for me in all of the insidious ways the systemic advantage of being white has baked itself into every part of our organizations and our societies, even ones that you think are supposed to be progressive and, you know, out there trying to do the right thing. It's everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Paula. I see you, Laura, and then after Laura, then we'll go to I saw Edward's hand. Robert, I'm gonna get you. I want to get Laura and Edward first.
So thank you, first of all, for doing this. This is fantastic. I've really appreciated everybody's comments. And I had two things that came to mind. And one is my family is Mexican on both sides. And so I think that I had some understanding of the differences because I was the light-skinned child out of 4 siblings. And it was definitely easier for me to move in spaces in suburban Southern California than it was for some of my other siblings and for my cousins and aunts and uncles. And so I wouldn't put it even remotely in the same category, but I would say that I grew up self-conscious in those situations where it was clear that I fit in just like everyone else, but my sibling or my cousin or my grandmother who was there with me didn't. And it's a hard thing to come to terms with, but if you don't acknowledge it, I mean, you just have to. Once you see it, and Kate said it earlier, it's invisible, and sometimes you get caught by surprise. that it exists, but once you see it, I think, for me anyway, from an ethical standpoint, you just can't continue to ignore it. You have to do something. And then I don't know if this was where Jonathan, I think it was Jonathan was his name, was going with his earlier comments about Wilmington, but I've been feeling recently like what happened on January 6th of this year could be very much like Wilmington. And it just makes me so sad that such a horrendous thing could happen. And because we don't want to look at it for what it is, we will just let it go. So those are my observations. Thank you.
Laura, thank you so much for putting those wise words on us. Edward.
Hello, everyone. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Name's Ed McCants. I am a adjunct psychology professor at Marion Technical College here in Marion, Ohio. Got my bachelor's degree at Wisconsin, Milwaukee, where I had a great all-American career way back when. It was like 15 years ago now. I'm old. And decided to go back to school and get my master's degree in psychology and completing my doctoral of education now. One of the things that's glaringly obvious to me in just having these types of conversations is how we avoid cognitive dissonance to even have this conversation. And what I mean by that is we call it white privilege. We call it white advantage. But what I see it as is an aftermath of an established 400 years, not of systemic racism, but of actual realized laws that made and ordained a belief system around who is superior. So I would say that is the initial privilege, to say that we are allowed to make the rules of what it is going to be the norms, what are going to be the norms. And I think that's what we're seeing now, that it's become an unconscious bias now because it's been normalized. So with that, I'm moved back to a small town. And I'm going to give you a I'm going to try to sum this up in 60 seconds quickly. My experience with white supremacy, if you will, was as a little black kid, I always saw there was a white guy named Dave Merchant who was on the wall. He walked on to Ohio State. He averaged like 24 points a game. He was second team All State. That was like 40 or 50 years ago. 20 years ago, I became the all-time leading scorer in this area. I got a college scholarship into the Big Ten at Northwestern. And I also became a collegiate All-American. 15 years goes by and they're celebrating, and I've been enshrined in Milwaukee, where they're really showing and proving that our Black lives as athletes do matter. So to go back to Milwaukee 15 years later as a really segregated city, a really systemically really ill injustice type of community is what's going on right now. I think it's some 48% of African Americans between the ages of 25 and like 35 are incarcerated in Milwaukee. So to have African Americans in a downtown arena right across the street from the Milwaukee Bucks is a great testament. But when I come back to Marion, Ohio, and I say these things, I'm always demonized in some way. It just can't be, this is Ed McCants, and he's telling you he's been enshrined at a Division I university, yet there's still just a simple walk-on the wall. And I think it makes it glaringly obvious because we've had other African Americans that have attained Division I success and scholarships on the same type of level that they're honoring as a walk-on accomplishment. So I think when I say things in my small town, I like to get things riled up. So I have a way about myself where I like to be belligerently honest and real about things. And so when I tell people, you don't think that there's racism, but look around. The white people are superior. There are no Black managers. There are no Black attorneys. There are no African-American doctors. I'm the one of the only 2 faculty members in higher education. There's no Black principals. So all the superior positions are held by white people. You can look at the presidencies. It's all white people. I would say that's established. It's not even a question. That is established supremacy. We have established supremacy as a way of life. And now we're trying to figure out how long this is going to take to undo 400 years of conditioning. So this is the first step. So thank you, William Lewis. And thank you all for attending. That's all I have for now.
Edward, thank you. Ed, thank you so much. Something that he said, which was pretty deep. I did not understand. I had a General Lee car. Dukes of Hazzard used to come on in the 70s. I used to love the Dukes of Hazzards. I had my Hot Wheels General Lee car, and I would be jumping that car all over, crashing into everything in my room. And my mother would be like, boy, stop making all that noise. And I would watch the Dukes of Hazzard show and just love the way Bo and Luke would slide across the General Lee, and they would get in that car and they would run through all of the barns and stuff, and Boss Hogg and his Cadillac with the horns, all of that, right? I loved it. I didn't realize that I was loving the Confederate flag. Unconscious bias, Ed. Unconscious. I didn't realize that white supremacy was so embedded within American society that it was like I was breathing it, and I accepted it and didn't know it until I read about the origins and the purpose, not even the origins, the purpose of the Confederate flag. Have y'all read the purpose of the Confederate flag? Do y'all know what it says? The Confederate flag purpose is to symbolize, y'all go for it, look it up, to symbolize white superiority and black inferiority. The Confederate flag was the symbol for the Confederacy during Civil War. And so this was the battle flag for Civil War, and that battle flag said, I think it was William Thompson, look it up, fact check me, that the flag symbolizes a God-ordained white supremacy over black inferiority. And I'm this little black boy playing with my General Lee car. So you're talking about stuff that is unconscious, stuff that's embedded. So that system, when we talk about the system, we all live a part of that system, and that system impacts everybody. It gets to the point, and that's the thing about the system. The system gets to the point to where you forget about the origins. You forget about what it really means. And so in America, the system was set up for black inferiority.
Well, and Will, I think, in one of our conversations, I think maybe in our episode, we talk about imagery and the power of imagery. I mean, the Confederate flag being like one of the most notable, obvious images of, this. And, but I'm also like back to just the air we breathe and the systemic, deep nature of it. I mean, the imagery around, like, this summer, I think Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben and some of those things, like, I mean, how many of y'all got Uncle Ben's in your pantry? I mean, that is this like powerful imagery that this is how the system propels the system. If I grew up as a little kid, because I watched Dukes of Hazzard and Daisy Duke, she had big old blonde hair, like, and so the images bake the thoughts, and then the thoughts become the actions, and then the actions propel the system generation after generation after generation, till suddenly, we're eating pancakes and we just don't even know what the heck we're doing. Like, and I think that's where when all the white people here are talking about how invisible it is, I mean, yeah, it's invisible because it's been on our side for 400 years. I mean, we've been allowed to operate in it.
Yeah.
Thoughtlessly.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kate. Hey, Jonathan, I see you back, and so we want to recognize you again.
Thank you. Sorry, I apologize about getting cut off.
No problem.
I guess one of my students must have said, "Oh, he's talking. You better mute him." But as I was saying, as you talked about, Dr. Lewis, about Bacon's Rebellion, then looking at Wilmington, there's a thing, if you always continuation, even when you talk about Bacon, you said there's just a small group. There were, poor whites, middle class whites. There were, even through the Confederacy, the majority of slave owners weren't big Gone with the Wind owners. And really, even when you look at it, the majority of whites were not slave owners at all. Now, they lived in a system that existed. But when we look at this whole thing of white supremacy or white advantage and why it still continues, I mean, we're all saying, oh, we see it, people are realizing, we're talking about, so why is it continuing? What keeps us from moving forward is also based on fear. The fear that if you were, during slavery, the fear was that you weren't going to be able to have access to the wealth of slaves. And maybe as a poor white, I might not be able to, but my child might grow up to be a slave owner. So we have to perpetuate the system in the hopes that they will rise up and get that wealth. And the fear is, if you change that, the fear is, then man, we're all gonna be stuck being poor. Well, when slavery goes away, that status did not go away though. You know, blacks were still held in a degree of servitude. And then you have other communities that come in and that they're put in a place of being less. So you're part of the LGBTQ community, you're less. You're female, there's going to be less. You can't vote, you're not going to have this money. There's always this, oh, you're Native American, there's less. And so when we talk about America is this home of the free and it's a place of equality, well, really it's a place that's built on fear. The fear that if we actually are equal, then I'm going to miss out, or my family's going to miss out on the opportunity of getting wealth or maintaining wealth. And so we all realize what's going on, but the fear is, do we want to be the ones to change it? Because it's just, and I'll finish with this, it's just like the time I went to Vegas. And you go to Vegas, okay, I'm playing that slot machine. I'm playing the slot machine. I'm playing dollar slots because I want the big jackpot. And nothing happens. And I must have put in about $20. I didn't win anything. So I figured, I'm looking around, everybody moves to a different machine. So I moved to a different machine, but I'm still keeping an eye on that machine I put $20 in. And this elderly lady comes up, and 2 pulls later, she hits a big payout. And I'm standing there like, that's my money. I mean, I put it, that's, you know, and then it's thinking, man, if I had to stay there a little bit longer, I would have got the jackpot. So why change? Because if we change, if we stop this whole thing of supremacy, maybe I stopped it too soon before I would have got my wealth. So we just allow it to continue.
Wow. Jonathan, thank you for so much for putting that on us. Oh my goodness, y'all coming with some deep stuff. Skin color, systematic racism, making good trouble, unconscious bias, fear. Oh my goodness. Now let's switch. We have about 10 more minutes or so within the context of this conversation. And if y'all want to stay after for the after party, we can stay after. But I want to get to Jonathan left us with something which I want to get to. So you have this allied continuum. And on this allied continuum, and those our guests who participate in the podcast, you know that, you know, you got on the continuum, you have ally, you have an accomplice, and then you have co-conspirator. The ally is, hey, how you doing? You know, how can I help you? The accomplice is, you know what, you about to go to the march? Okay, I'm gonna go with you. Let's write. I'm gonna write my placard. I'm gonna go there with you. The co-conspirator is like, hey, you know what? Oh, let's start our own march. You know, let's start our own march. And as a matter of fact, I got some bail money, and we're gonna make sure that we all gonna get out on time and be safe. And so that's the co-conspirator, right? So when you think about it, Sherilyn and Kate and Karen and Fabian and Paula, when you think about how do we make this thing, how do we change this? Getting back to Jonathan's kind of his encouragement there. How do we change this individually? How do you change it individually? How do you become an ally or an accomplice or a co-conspirator? Or so you can think about how do you do it, or you can even think about what you have done to become one of those three. Sherilyn, what are your thoughts on that?
I was thinking about sort of my first point of awareness. And I mean, I grew up in a pretty diverse neighborhood. I grew up in Vancouver, near Vancouver, British Columbia. You wouldn't know it now, but my family was displaced. It's a long story, but anyway, not about me. But a lot of, real diversity all through all of my growing up years. I went to university where, there was, people were, of course, there were white people and black people and immigrants and other cultures, just kind of a mix, but kind of everybody, my perception was, well, we're all saying, I'm so cool, like Kate was saying, yeah, I'm so cool, everybody's the same. I'm chill with it. And but I had these, I had some real racist thinking, which I wasn't aware of until sort of an aha moment for me. I was in graduate school, and my family did come from poverty, like kind of Mississippi Delta type, how my dad grew up. And so this was part of this is really almost part of my racist thinking. Well, look at what my dad did. Here was Sputnik. With the Sputnik came money for people to go to school, people, white men. But anyway, here's my dad on the farm, really living in cyclical poverty, and he had opportunity to go to school. And so, and he worked hard, and it was very careful with his money, and, went into teaching, and then got another degree, and then did something else. And, actually he is a professor, which is what took us to Vancouver. But in my, almost that was, gosh, look what my dad did, which is great. I absolutely adore both of my parents for the courage that they had to do that. But in my head, this is the American dream. Everybody can do this. Here is the recipe, people. You can do this. Isn't this wonderful? And I was in grad school when I was sharing this great story, and my professor said, yeah, well, that is really good. Good for you. And your dad was born with 2 commodities. And I was like, it was doing, and so that's really when I flipped a switch. But I didn't, it wasn't like I went from that to this. There's, like you said, it's the continuum. And I feel like the more I read and the more I engage in these conversations and watch documentaries and listen to podcasts, like I want more, because I'm so, just like somebody was saying about the 1619 Project, well, maybe that wasn't, there's some pushback because maybe it wasn't actual, accurate history. What was? We've been sold this story, and so I feel like I can't learn enough. And the more I learn, what I'm doing for myself, the more I write down things, and I in my book list is How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. And I love the way that he talks about racism, and it's exactly the things that have been shared here by Edward and Jonathan and Mary. This is a racist system. You are a racist or you are an anti-racist. And then he gave examples, and that gave me the liberty, the permission to say, oh, I am a racist because these things. And I keep a journal, and the more I read and the more I watch and the more I discuss, the more it's kind of unpacks, and then I can list and I can own those things without being, well, you're a hate mongerer, because no, but when you know better, do better. And that's what I'm working on. And speaking up, just like when Paul was saying, I have been in meetings, and I read something recently. I'm sorry, I know somebody can fill in who the author of this quote was. I can't remember who it was, but it's easier to stand up to your enemies than it is to stand up to your friends. And even when I'm in meetings at work, it takes courage when you hear those kind of implicit, to say, hey, here's how that could be taken. And I've been the recipient of those comments as well. Within the last month, I received an email about something that I said that I didn't know. And so, which I appreciated the courage it took for that person to tell me. And instead of my response being, oh, no, I didn't mean that. Oh, I'm not a racist. No, you know me. My response was, oh, I didn't know, but I'm really glad you told me. I say this all the time. And of course, now I'm going to stop saying it. But those, I mean, I can't know that if I'm not ready and willing to learn things.
Yeah. Sherilyn, thank you. You're keeping a journal. So it's an evolution. So for you, this whole notion between allies and accomplice and co-conspirator is really about an evolution. The more that you read and learn and journal and become aware, the more that you can show up differently in your own life and how you're engaging with others. Thank you. Kate, what about you?
Yeah, I think probably like a lot of white people on this call, I struggle with my place on this continuum. I do like the idea that it's a continuum. And I think, for me, I talked earlier about like my own personal journey that began, really a few years ago, if I'm being honest. And, it was an interesting summer for me, probably like a lot of white people. There was a Black woman who worked for me who, I give her a lot of credit for being very brave and very honest and very candid. And we had, conversations on Zoom and on the phone and, occasionally in the office. Obviously COVID was a factor, but, she actually said to me once, she said, the Wake Forest you went to and the Wake Forest I went to were just two different schools. And that is a moment for me that I really appreciate, that she was willing to trust me and be that vulnerable with me. Because I think that's a hard thing to say, to someone who doesn't look like you and you may not trust, how they're going to react. They're also your boss. I mean, who knows what I could have said, I guess, to that. But, I think that on the continuum, it's really up to each of us to continue to keep working to be the next best version of ourselves. I will be a better manager of all people, but certainly people of color, because, I had that gift of this young woman who worked for me. I hope that I will be, a better mother to my children when they want to talk about these things, because of people, like you, William, or others like you on this call that are brave enough to talk about it. So I definitely think it's a continuum for sure. I think that's a good way to think about it.
Kate, thank you so much, without a doubt. Paula.
Yeah, so I completely agree with Sherilyn and Kate and appreciate their comments here. I think that when I think about the continuum, I do think it's like an evolution, and every day we're trying to be a better version of ourselves, to show up better and stronger. But I also think that part of my motivation for that is that, and Fabi, you talked about the guilt like that comes with, as you're sort of understanding and trying to reconcile, your identity, right? And who you think you are, right? And how the guilt that kind of comes with that. And I think that for me, the biggest thing is that whenever I feel a taste of that guilt, I heard this comment about like, it was, and maybe it's even a book, but like, talked about like white women and their toxic tears, and people of color, they don't need all that. Like, that does them no good for me to be crying about the pain and suffering. Like, it does them no good. What really does good is action and showing up. And so for me, I use that as a gauge when I start to feel some of that as that guilt, like, whoa, this is the time to show up better and to act and to not wait for somebody to teach me, but to, I don't know, I guess what I'm trying to do is to dig into that more and more every time because, well, frankly, our society, especially recently, has really given us lots of examples and ways and reasons to feel pretty guilty and crappy about being a white person. And I feel like I'm going to take that for what it is and use it to hopefully be better.
Yeah, yeah. Paula, I appreciate you. I remember I responded to somebody on Facebook. I don't know, it was somebody, I think it was somebody in our group, Sherilyn, and I
It was
said
me.
somebody, was it you? And I think you said you felt guilty. I said, oh, we don't need your guilt. We need your action.
Ashamed, I said.
Shame. We don't need that shame. Don't be ashamed. You are who you are. Now that's what we're gonna do about it. So I think that's the space we got to be in, without a doubt. Karen.
I'm so glad you called on me, William, because I wanted to build on something that Paula just said, which is doing things. So I'm a doer. I can't just sit around and think all the time. Like I get antsy. I got to do something, right? So that to me has been more of my practice in my journey to be an anti-racist. And you and I talked about this too. Like, I don't feel like it's up to me to place myself on that continuum. You called me an accomplice, which was something I'd never heard before. And I think my comment to you was, wow, thanks. That feels like a promotion. So like, I think I can own being an accomplice now. And I think I'm working on being a co-conspirator, right? And that's actually been a tough transition to me. And you and I have not had a chance to talk about this yet. So I'm going to verbally process this a little bit, but making that leap for me has been both exciting and painful because this whole process, I just step in things all the time that are hard, like hard conversations and hard questions of my own identity and, my moral obligation and the way that I want to leave the world. And it just requires a lot of work. And in this last year, like I have lost relationships that have been very meaningful to me. And they've been, it's been around some of these issues and it has tested my resolve, right? If I'm just being really honest, like it has tested my commitment to it. And so how I've come out of it is I've said, my commitment is to the work, not to that person, right? And so even if I thought we were walking the same path, that's not always been true. And so my commitment remains. Oh, my sweet wife just brought me dinner. Oh, thank you, honey. I know y'all can't have her. So that's been the challenge for me is like when my commitment gets tested, how do I keep showing up? How do I keep showing up and questioning myself? How do I keep showing up and standing up for others? How do I keep showing up and supporting the work, even when it's really comes at a personal, emotional, like a heart cost, Yeah.
Karen, wow, that's deep because there's a cost. There's a cost to this work. And so that's really deep. All right. I think we got stuck there. Sorry about that. Fabi.
I love everything that everybody has said throughout the entire evening. What I can do as I continue to evolve and to continue having the courage to evolve is really working from where I'm currently at. I am learning to market my company different to be able to make sure that I am serving amazing authors with fantastic stories that are very diverse. And so far that's worked amazingly. We will proudly be publishing 6 African-American Black authors early this year. And I've just put myself in a point of service, and I'm learning so much from them as I do others, but just from a richer standpoint. And my personal mission is to really I aspire to go from accomplice to co-conspirator, and learning more and more ways that I can genuinely do that and genuinely be of service in the best of ways through collaboration.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. I want to say thank you to all of our panelists. You all have put something on the table for sure. Thank you so much for your voice. Thank you, Fabi. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Sherilyn. Thank you, Paula. Thank you so much. You have put this on the table for us to deal with. And y'all, the reality, here's two things, two closing points for me that I want to share with you. First, Black folks can't eliminate racism. White folks got to do that. That's the first thing. We didn't create it. We can't eliminate it. And it is psyche. It's all about the mindset, and it's been codified by laws. So there's a lot of work to do. That's the second point. This is work. I don't care where you are on the continuum. I just want you on a continuum. If you're going to be an ally, an accomplice, a co-conspirator, I just want you there because we need you there. And when you get there, you got to work to help us out, to help not only just Black folks, but everybody. It takes all of us to make this thing happen. The President Biden, made a choice. He said, I'm going to choose a woman. That's the first choice. Second choice, I'm going to choose a Black woman. That came with a cost. He's a very powerful white man, politically connected, economically well-to-do. His legacy is at a cost. But he said, this is what I'm going to do. My closing remarks to everybody on this call is to ask yourself, what are you going to do? I want to say thank you to everybody on the call. I got one shameless plug, but it ain't really shameless. If y'all like coffee, if y'all like tea, y'all have to go to Cam's Coffee Company, shop.camscoffeeco.com. Do good, drink good, get you some coffee. That is our 12-year-old son, Cam's Coffee. Good stuff. Check it out. If y'all want to stay after for the after party, I'm still here at 8 o'clock. If y'all got to go, y'all go. Have a good evening. Thank you so much for your time. And I will turn this thing back around to you very quickly. Thank you. I see you, Beth. I see you, Carol. Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you. If y'all want to stay after, we can stay after. We in the after party now. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna stop the recording.